Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Henneberry of the 99's Webinar Committee, and I welcome you to tonight's presentation, Flying the Air Race Classic, What is Air Racing All About, with Emmy Dillon. This webinar is sponsored by SiriusXM, and we appreciate their support. And now I will hand things over to Glenna Backwell, who will introduce Emmy.
Oh, thank you, Deb. I'm Glenna Blackwell. I belong to the New England Section 99s, and I'm happy to be working with Deb to produce these 99 lectures. And this month, we're really happy to feature Emmy Dillon. Emmy will discuss flying the Air Race Classic and what air racing is all about. She is a member of the San Diego Chapter 99s. Emmy's background in aviation includes flight instruction, ferry flying, fixed wing, ambulance, charter flight operations and management, as well as cargo. And of course, air race flying. Welcome, Emmy Dillon. Please.
Well, thank you so much, 99s, for Glenna and Deb for having me tonight. You've done such a wonderful job introducing me. I'm so excited to be here. Obviously, I've got my professional flying side, but I've also got my fun flying side, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about tonight. So this is me. I'm Emmy Dillon. I'm the Director of Education for the Air Race Classic. And let's talk a little bit about what we're talking about tonight. So I'm thrilled to be here on behalf of the Air Race Classic to share about our organization and our event. So this year, we're celebrating 48 years of this annual air race. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our history, what air racing is, who races, and give a little peek into a day in the life of what it's like to race with us. And I'll close out by briefly talking about our alternative flying challenge called the ARC Air Derby. At the end, I'll also provide some resources for you to help further your exploration of air racing. I've been involved with the Air Race Classic since 2015, and I've been on the board since 2020. And luckily, I'm very fortunate to have 5 races under my belt, having raced my most recent race in 2024 with Janae, who's another 99. So if you're not familiar with who we are or what we do, this is what we are. We are an all women's transcontinental air race. We fly 2,200 to 2,400 nautical miles across 4 days, daytime VFR. These are some amazing pictures of the ladies that raced in the 2024 air race. And oh my gosh, look how excited and how much fun they were having while they were doing this air race. So the Air Race Classic, we're this long-lasting legacy of women pilots and women in aviation dating back all the way back to 1929. And so let's go back to the 1920s. Aviation was still a new commodity and an exciting venture for everyone, pilots and the public alike. The cross-country national air races have been going on since 1920, but women were not initially permitted to participate. So, because the women were not allowed to fly in these races, the women pilots decided to create their own. So, in 1929, the Women's Air Derby, which was a side event of the national air races, was born. It was the only race that allowed women and was the first to allow women. There were 20 competitors, including some famous names like Amelia Earhart, Poncho Barnes, Ruth Nichols, and Louise Thaden. The racers and their airplanes fit into 2 classes, and it took 8 days for these ladies to fly the route solo from Santa Monica, California to Cleveland, Ohio. I'll show the full route here on the next slide for you to take a look at to see how many stops these ladies had to make. The winners were Louise Thaden for the heavyweight class and Phoebe Omley for the light aircraft class. Here's it to take a look at what the 1929 route looks like. But what does our connection back to the 99s equate to? Well, it's rumored that during the 1929 Derby, the racers and other women pilots said, hey, you know what? I think we need a group. We need to figure out a way to better support each other and encourage each other. Let's start a club. And voila, shortly thereafter, the 99s were created. Amelia and Louise are loosely credited with being the 2 founders of the 99s, or 2 of the founders of the 99s, I should say. Today, our entire board of directors are 99s, so we have a very deep connection with the 99s going all the way back to both organizations' inceptions. Now I'm going to play a little video for you showing you all of our routes from 1929 and beyond. After the 1929 race, women's air racing grew and continued growing into multiple facets. The Powder Puff Derby became almost a household name, which was coined by Will Rogers during the first races because after a long day of flying, the women would have publicity events and they had to switch from their flying gear and use a powder puff to cover the oil that was on their faces. The Powder Puff Derby name was most commonly associated with the all women's transcontinental air race, or also known as the AWTAR, which flew from 1947 to 1977. The first few years, the 99s owned and operated the race, and again, demonstrating the deep connection that women's air racing has with the 99s. In 1977, the current racing organization, the Air Race Classic, was incorporated from the AWTAR, and we continue our tradition of women's air racing today. As you can see by all of these routes that are showing on the screen, just how much of the country we've been able to see since 1929. You've also probably seen a lot of repeats because we're trying to honor so much of our history that goes all the way back to that 1929 Women's Air Derby. We are so passionate about our history and our connection to these fabulous 20 women that made this whole thing possible for us. This is our 48th year running the race as the Air Race Classic, and being able to say that we're celebrating 48 years of the Air Race Classic is so exciting. Our board of directors and our volunteer network work diligently to keep the legacy of women's air racing alive and to follow the ARC's mission of encouraging, promoting, and demonstrating women in air racing, women in aviation, and women in STEM, while also preserving the legacy of the 20 incredible women that opened the doors for us in air racing. One of the most common questions we get is, oh, is this like the Reno air races? And well, as much as I wish it was, the short answer is no, it's not quite like Reno. But this does open an opportunity to share about the different types of air racing and what type of air racing the Air Race Classic is. So we've broken it down into three basic types of air racing. There may be others, but I'm going to keep it to these three just for simplicity. So the first is what people most commonly associate it with air racing, the closed course pylon race, similar to the style of Reno or the Red Bull air races when those were around. It's the fly fast, turn left type of flying, and when it's purely speed based, really, involving highly modified airplanes racing these courses. As you can see on the screen, we've got all kinds of different airplanes. If you're familiar with so many of the legacies of the Reno racers, as well as the Red Bull Air Racers as well. A great opportunity for racing, but not quite what we do here at the Air Race Classic. Our second type of racing, we call it rally races or derbies for short. These races focus on your flying skills and precision flying. You might be solving puzzles or answering trivia questions or finding landmarks on the ground. It's really kind of an adventure type of racing. So, usually, any type of aircraft can participate in these races, which is a little bit different from the Reno style and a little bit different from the Air Race style as well. Although this presentation is about the Air Race Classic, the transcontinental race, we, the Air Race Classic, also do offer our own derby. We call it the ARC Air Derby, which is hosted in the fall and started in 2021. I'll talk a little bit more about this towards the end of the presentation, but I did want to mention that we do actually have our own derby as well. If you've ever flown a Poker Run or the Havasu 600, Palms to Pines, AirVenture Cup, all of those are great examples of these rally races and derbies, but not quite what the Air Race Classic is. So, this third type of air racing, we're calling it a handicap race. It's really a handicapped speed race. These handicap races use specific approved type aircraft, like for the Air Race Classic, the aircraft must be stock or modified stock, that are approved through rules as to who can participate. Racers use strategy to beat their assigned handicap speed, which we'll talk about handicapping a little bit later in the presentation. So the teams get an assigned speed and they have to fly the speed on a posted race course. So again, the Air Race Classic, the goal is to have a strategy to beat your handicap assigned speed the best. That's what the Air Race Classic is all about. It's this handicap speed race. Now, people always want to know, well, who races in the Air Race Classic? And of course, as you know, it's women pilots of all ages and all walks of life. It's really beautiful. Back in 1977, when the Air Race Classic began, we had 23 teams and 40 racers. But we've grown to a high in 2018 of 52 teams and 112 racers. Absolutely incredible. Now, a team is comprised of a minimum of two women pilots. You can include a third or a fourth person or teammate if your airplane accommodates it. Top finishers range from brand new pilots with 100 hours PIC all the way up to veteran ATPs like myself. We have teachers, nurses, doctors, entrepreneurs, lawyers, students, engineers, businesswomen, scientists, programmers, professional pilots, air traffic controllers. I'm running out of breath. There's so many authors, military service members, you name it. I guarantee you that they've raced. We have all sorts of people from all walks of life, and it's really amazing to be able to interact with and fly with these women. We also have a large, actually, history of international competitors to participate. 71 so far in the grand scheme of things, which I consider to be a relatively large number because this race is so locally located within the United States. Of those 71 international competitors, some have been from Fiji and Kosovo as well, which I find very interesting. We've also had 74 mother-daughter teams compete, 20 sister teams, including twins. We've also had an assortment of grandmother, granddaughter, aunt, niece, life partner, spouse teams, all of the above. I do want to point out one family in particular that's on this slide. Here in the middle, we've got this family of three wonderful lady pilots. This lady in the middle, her name is Marie. And Marie is 94, if not 95 years old, and she still flies in the Aries Classic flying left seat. And I have an amazing story of watching her come in. It was really windy, big crosswinds, and here comes the Carastros, and with a beautiful, gorgeous, buttered landing. Who was at the controls? Marie. So that's so much fun to share and just see how beautiful the connection is between, not only families and, women, but just everybody from every walk of life. It's really beautiful. Of course, though, I will say we do have a rather large percentage of our racers that are 99s, which means that our connection, of course, just deepens even further back to that original 1929 conversation. The rules continue to develop over time and evolve because we need to. That's how we continue to grow as an organization and grow as a race. Now, one of the biggest evolutions that we've had as an organization and as a race was the recruitment of college teams. And as you can see by this picture here, just how many collegiate racers that there were in the start in 2018. This was in Sweetwater, Texas, at the National WASP World War II Museum. Now, the first college team to participate was Purdue University in 1994, and they've consistently participated since. We've had over 470 collegiate racers over the years, and the number of colleges participating has grown to a high of 22 teams in 2018. In 2024, we had 14 colleges represented by 22 teams as well. I love showing all of the different universities and just how many there are, and they're just wonderful girls to meet. They're right at the cusp of a really fantastic career, and it's really fun to be able to watch them experience the Air Race Classic and also to talk to them after the fact to talk about what they learned and what they're going to take back to their schools and their future careers as well. Now, teams can race an array of single engine or multi engine airplanes. As you can see by this slide, the most popular ones are Cessnas, Pipers, Sierras, Moonies, a couple Beechcraft in there as well. But there are also many other makes and models that participate in the Air Race Classic. Sometimes we have a little bit more of an unusual take. Sometimes we've had Citabria fly. 2 years ago, I believe, we had a Luscombe fly. And get this, they placed in the top 10. 115 horsepower Luscombe placed in top 10. So you can do it. A Tampico has also flown. We've also had twins like Barons and Twin Comanches also participate. And the one that I find the coolest is we've actually had a Cessna on floats participate. I would have loved to have been around and participated and watched them race with floats. What an interesting handicap process that must have been. The airplane's ages range from the 1940s to 1950s built, all the way to brand new factory built airplanes that were built literally that year. Previous race planes from the 1970s AUTAR era have also raced during the Air Race Classic era, which is super fun. So you ask yourself, well, how can all of these different types of airplanes race against each other in one race? Essentially, you're really racing against yourself. We have a couple of different classes racing. The first class is competition class, which is flying at full throttle and competing for the highest level of prizes and awards. We also, new for 2024, was the intercollegiate class. And if you ask any of the collegiate racers, they loved it. The intercollegiate class, which is intended for collegiate teams with either the electronic data monitoring airplanes or EDMA airplanes, like G1000 equipped airplanes, or standard competition full throttle airplanes. EDMA is now a subset of the intercollegiate class, which allows collegiate teams to race while flying a selected RPM instead of flying full throttle. Lastly, but certainly not least, is the non-competition class, which is for those who want to gain the experience of the Air Race Classic just for fun, or they're flying an airplane that is turbocharged or experimental that does not meet the requirements for the race itself. To win the race, you have to achieve the highest score overall. I previously mentioned that each airplane has a handicap, so let's talk about that. To get your score, you take your race speed and subtract the handicap, and then subtract any penalties, and that's your score. So speed minus handicap minus penalties equals score. Today's Air Race Classic handicaps each airplane individually. This allows us to account for factors such as the age of the engine, exterior condition, weight of equipment, and so on. So what you see here is a partial list of results from 2022, with the first place being a Cessna 172, whose handicap speed was 142.272. The fourth place was also a 172, but was much older and had a slower handicap of 135.329. Prior to the race, you fly a handicap flight to establish the handicap speed for your airplane. The handicap is flown in a square shape and at the same density altitude for all aircraft to try and mitigate as many environmental factors and influences as possible. Switch gears and talk about the routes. How do we choose the routes and why do they look the way that they look? Because they all look so different. Remember that slideshow we looked at earlier? How vastly different, nearly 100 years of air racing has led to so many different types of routes. Each route is different. That's what makes it so unique and so fun. And the main reason for this is we want to give racers a great opportunity to visit and fly in parts of the country that they might not otherwise have flown in or have ever been to or may never go to. It also allows racers to experience different types of terrain and airspace, which is a huge part of the educational aspect of the race. Education is one of the biggest mission goals that we have as an organization. With these 3 years shown on the screen, as you see, and recalling back to, that earlier presentation, 1929 and beyond, sometimes our routes go coast to coast, like we had in 1929 or pretty close to it, or even in 2025, as I'll talk about in a little bit. But sometimes we stick to a certain shape, like a star shape, or even within certain regions, one or two regions. Some years we've gone up and down, some years we've gone stuck in a star shape in the southeast. It just depends year to year, and that's what's the fun of it as well. It's also a fun process to be a part of, to be able to participate in building the routes as well. In the upper right map there, we ended up in Canada, which added huge additional factors for the education side of things because it gave racers the opportunity to learn about how to fly across an international border, as well as learning about Canada's aviation regulations. The race has gone into Canada quite a few times, actually, but normally the route usually stays confined to the lower 48. We always try to add interesting places to the race. Like, for example, in 2019, we also went to Niagara Falls. I mean, that's pretty cool. We also tried to go to interesting places on the race. Like, we went to Niagara Falls in 2019. We also really emphasized the importance of visiting historical places, like Sweetwater, Texas in 2018, where the Wasp learned to fly. We want people to enjoy where they go and get excited about the route, so we always keep these things in mind when we're planning the route. Now, as I said earlier, the route is always between 2,200 and 2,400 nautical miles, and it'll vary year to year. There are 8 or 9 stops between the start and the terminus, which define where we begin and where we end the race. We usually start the route planning process years in advance by identifying, determining, and talking with starts and terminuses that are interested in participating. Once we have a confirmed start and terminus, we begin filling in the middle of the route. Now, all of the legs have a max average of 300 to 310 nautical miles or less than. Now, the biggest reason behind this is actually considering the increased fuel that you're consuming. Because the race planes are flying at full power, or if you're flying under EDMA in the intercollegiate class, you're flying at a higher power setting than normal, the fuel consumption is naturally higher. But while also considering the higher fuel consumption, there's also the possibility of headwinds, which we obviously can't control. So by limiting the max to be 300, that 310 nautical mile area, is that it allows race planes to carry enough fuel plus reserve to successfully fly the legs. The range and the fuel burn increase are definitely things that you want to consider when you're picking your race plane. Very, very important. So it's really important to examine the route that you may be flying this year and take a look at the available airplanes that you may have access to, or whatever your strategy may be for picking an airplane, but definitely consider your range and fuel burn increase. Some of the airports we pick for a route have requested to be a stop. Actually, a lot of these airports that you see on this slide, they have really requested to be a stop. We actually got a lot of interest from different airports because they want to participate in this. But others are chosen because they're in an optimum position for a given route design. But we always try to go to airports we have not been to before because we want, share the love. We want everybody to not only be able to see the country, but we also want all of these airports to be able to experience the race for what it is as well. However, we have been to some repeats, and that's usually because we've been asked to come back because the communities or the airport just really wanted to be a part of it again. So that has happened. But other criteria we look into at airports include runway condition, runway length, parallel taxiways, fuel availability, ramp space. Because think about it, you need a ramp space for 50 to 60 airplanes. So that does kind of limit where we can go to. And of course, what I think is actually one of, a more important, or I won't say the most important because the runway configuration is pretty important, but a very important aspect to consider is hotel availability nearby. Because imagine it, if all of you end up at the same airport one night, they have to be able to hold, about 120 people. So that's a very important thing that we consider. We also prefer to not use towered airports as stops, but we have used that in the past. Towered airports are, of course, completely fine and safe, but that does impact racers' performance because, of course, you have to follow what air traffic control says. What they say goes, and that may impact when you may or may not go back on course for the route. So that's why we tend to avoid them, but by no means do we totally avoid them. We've done it before. Now, one of the biggest things we look for when designing a route is looking at the local aviation community as well, because everyone at an ARC stop is a volunteer and many of them are 99s. If you can't race, then I really encourage you to consider being a volunteer at a stop near you. So let's talk about what the timers and what the volunteers do at these stops. So the way that this works is that the teams take off one by one from the start airport, and they have 4 days to fly the whole route in daytime VFR. The teams will have to determine how many legs they fly each day, where they want to overnight, which must be at an ARC stop airport, and develop strategies as to how they want to fly the route. Most strategies are based on weather, like finding the altitude with the best winds, flying ahead of a front, or waiting until it passes, figuring out the best time of day to fly, and pilot comfort as well. Some teams may fly one leg in one day and stop for the rest of the day. Others might fly 4 legs in that one day. Some might fly one leg, wait it out, and then fly another leg later in the day. Everyone has their own strategy. So, what does this have to do with the volunteers on the ground? Well, each team carries its own data logger, which tracks their flight path, their time, and their speed. But we need volunteers on the ground to back us up on that data. The volunteers on the ground, we're going to call them timers because they help time the racers as they cross the timing line. So these timers sit at the timing line at each ARC stop and make sure that the time is logged when each race plane flies across the timing line as they make their fast low approach, which we call the flyby. Timers also make sure that racers are safe and operating within ARC rules. After the racers do their flyby, they'll enter a normal traffic pattern, come into land, they'll get fuel, and they're going to flight plan. They might also overnight, but that definitely depends on the day and their strategy. Racers will then enter a normal traffic pattern, come into land, get fuel, and flight plan. They might also overnight, but that does depend on the day and that team strategy. When the racers are ready to take off again, the timers will get back into position at the timing line and watch as the racers take off, fly out a few miles, and they're going to get set up for their departure flyby, which will start their time for their next leg. Some airplanes carry enough fuel to fly through two legs, so they won't land, but they will have to do a flyby at every ARC stop airport. There are many opportunities besides being a timer to volunteer at the Air Race Classic. We need volunteers to help at the airports with the fueling process, assist the racers, help the FBO, be a cheerleading squad. As a racer myself, I cannot emphasize the importance of having a cheer squad for your racers because goodness, you can have long days, and it definitely puts a smile on your face when you see a whole community gathered together to celebrate this experience with you. Again, let's say that you're not near the route this year, but you still want to volunteer. There's so much work that happens behind the scenes throughout the year that makes the Aries Classic happen. If you're interested in volunteering, you can email us at info@ariesclassic.org. We always need as many volunteers as we can get. I'll have that email posted towards the end of the presentation so you can copy that down as well. Moving on to our 2025 routes. So we are so excited for 2025. This is such a unique route that we haven't seen in quite a few years. So this year's route is going to start in Fairhope, Alabama, and it's going to fly northwest up to Spokane, Washington at Phelps Field. We haven't had a true transcontinental route in quite a few years, so it's time to bring it back. And I'm really excited that this is next year's race route. We're very excited again to be working with Fairhope and with Phelps Field and for all of the exciting challenges that this year's route will bring. Obviously, as you can tell, mountain flying and density altitude are prominent challenges for this year's route, and the racers will have to make their way through various passes to get through the Rockies. You can learn more about the start, the terminus, and each 2025 airport on our website. Each airport has its whole blurb about it, and you can read about all of it, all about its history and its participation in this year's race. Each stop also gets a full page ad in the program and several copies sent to it. Each racer gets the copy of the program as a part of their participation, which is a super fun way to remember everybody that you've flown with and everywhere that you've been. I always keep my programs. I have as many people sign them as I can. And even as another testimonial, some of the race stops will also have these programs set out and racers will sign them. And I've had countless little girls walk up to me with these programs and had me sign it when I cross their airport. And that is just so touching. And what a phenomenal way for these little girls to remember this experience. Now, if you'd like more information on past race routes, you can go to the top of our website, which at every webpage, you're going to see race results. Race results is going to give you all kinds of details about past routes, race programs, winners, scores, etc. If you're interested in volunteering now or getting your airport on our interest list, because we always need more airports on our interest list, or just anything related to ARC routes in general, you can email Teresa. She's our director of routes. You can email her at route@airraceclassic.org, and I'll also have that later in this presentation. We are all caught up. We are ready to go. We're handicapped. We've got our airplane. We've got our team. We've got the route figured out. So let's talk about a day in the life of a racer. Now, this is what we call our fly camp. Fly camp is the third week of June because those are the longest days of the year, and because this is a day VFR race, that's extra important. So our fly camp, we get to see all of our friends from air racing and make new friends from all the first time racers or racers we have not met before. So usually every year the racers are comprised of a little under half of them are first timers and the rest are returning racers that come back to fly camp to see all their great friends. We love to get together, fly airplanes and see our friends, and that's really what the Air Race Classic allows us to do. So we get to the start about 5 days before the race. Sometimes you can get there a little bit less, which is perfectly fine. You're only actually required to show the Saturday prior to the race. So you actually only have to be there maybe 3 days before the race takes off. But again, team strategy, whatever works for you guys. So you're going to arrive to the start. You're going to park your airplane. You're going to make sure you clean your airplane, as you can see Janae is doing in the upper middle picture, because you got to get your airplane race ready. You want all those bugs from your travel to the start off your airplane clean as fast as possible. You're then going to sign in, check in with Air Race officials, and make sure you know that you're there and that you're ready to go. You're going to go through your racer credential check-in, which is when you show that you're not only legal to fly per the FAA, but you're also legal to fly you're also allowed and you're meeting the ARC rules to fly as well. Once you, the racers, have gone through your credential check-in, then your airplane will also go through a safety check to make sure that the instrumentation, radios, lights, required documents are all working before you launch for the actual race. At that point, the airplane is then impounded and the keys are kept by race officials. Now that the check in process is over, you can just enjoy the fun of it. Here's a couple of great pictures of these ladies getting checked in, getting fueled up, getting ready to go for the race itself before launch day. But before we can get to launch day, we have a couple other things we have to do. The first one is briefings. And oh my goodness, I know that sounds so boring, but trust me, it's so interesting actually. Briefings are how we fly the race safely. We talk about safety, we talk about the FAA waiver, weather, flybys, the airports and the route, airspace overview, logistical planning, and any sort of finalizing. Sounds like a lot, but imagine you've been planning this for 6 months. You got yourself registered in January and now it's June. So all of this is coming together. But these briefings also emphasize one of our biggest mission goals of aviation education. It sounds like a lot of death by PowerPoint, but it actually is a fun process to be a part of. The next step in this process is all of the team building that's involved with this. The Start and Terminus host super fun events for us within the local community, and we get to explore the areas. Sometimes there are scavenger hunts, super fun dinners, events, activities. It's just a great opportunity to actually meet and mingle with everybody, not only the other racers, but also the air race officials. It's a lot of fun, again, like I've said, just to make new friends and be with like minded people. Before we even get to the racing part, we have our own youth event. So this is our commitment to our mission statement of education and outreach and interacting with the youth. We work with girls all over the country to show them what aviation is about and show them what the air race is all about. Sometimes this is their first exposure ever to aviation or being near airplanes. So what a cool opportunity to be able to show all these girls what we love so much about aviation. Once all of that is done, it is time to race. I can't tell you, the launch of this race is just absolutely incredible. The adrenaline, the connection to the past. I mean, only so many pilots have been able to say that they've done this, and it's such an honor and a privilege to be able to be an Air Race Classic pilot. And the best part about this is we're not doing it just by ourselves. There's 50 other teams that you get to do this with, and it's so fun. And one of the super fun ways we connect while on this race route is with a common frequency to talk to each other on. We use it primarily, to check in on each other and also for the safety aspects of it to make sure we all know where each other is along the route. We're not usually that close, but it's always a good idea to have an idea of who's around you. But it's also a great opportunity just to let go of the stress a little bit. It's not an intense competition. You get to talk to each other and communicate and help each other throughout the race however you can. There's also something called map progress that the racers get to use, but it's actually primarily for like all your friends and family at home. We carry a little spot in our airplane and anybody can watch us along our route on our main website, theairraceclassic.org. So map progress is a wonderful way that we interact with our community so that people can watch us from anywhere all over the world. Again, there's also another way we interact with our communities and where people can check in on each other is we also post our overnight list. We call it the Ron list. This is where each team is located every night. So your friends and family are going to be able to know exactly where you're located on the route. And that way there's no concern as to where you are. It could take the entire 4 days for you to complete the race or even less. I've done it in 2, I've done it in all 4. Just depends on the year. It depends on the strategy, it depends on the weather, and it depends on the pilots you have in the airplane with you. The views of seeing the country is just such a positive experience and such a benefit of this. You get to view the country at a low level instead of flying up in the flight levels like I do for work. You get to see parts of the country that you wouldn't normally see, or maybe you have never seen before. Sometimes we've crossed the Mississippi 5 times or cross into multiple time zones. You just never know what each year is going to bring. The stops are very often actually organized by 99s. Ramona Banks in 2022, she was the stop chair in Tennessee, and she also helped out at the last stop in Alabama. So kudos to Ramona. She's been a past racer herself and is a very avid 99s volunteer. You get to meet all kinds of people as well, like those little girls that I was telling you about with the programs and having us sign it. I mean, how cool is that? We're so welcomed by their communities. I've met countless mayors and all kinds of people from these towns, and it's such a great welcoming experience as a racer. It really alleviates, the pressure that you might feel from the air race. It truly is just a great opportunity to interact with the communities. And of course, last but certainly not least is the fun. We do this for the fun of it, right? Isn't that what Amelia said? We do it for the fun of it. We get to make new friends, bond with fellow pilots and 99s, build new skills, build your confidence. I know I did. And of course, Leah, there's always the prize aspect too. So there are some financial prizes as well, as you can see on the screen. And lots of different ways you can win prizes. But frankly, for me, the biggest prize is just the countless friends that I've made through air racing. Let's talk about finding teammates. Okay, Emmy, this is so awesome. I am so hooked on the Air Race Classic, but I don't even know where to start. That's okay. I can help with that. So, before you even think about registering, let's get you entered as a racer. So, you don't have to have an airplane. You don't have to have a co-pilot. It can just be you that's interested. So, the first thing you're going to do is get yourself an account on our Air Race Classic website. It's completely free to register yourself as a racer. Now, if you've ever raced before or if you volunteered before, you don't have to make an account. You should still have your account. If you don't remember the login, no problem. We can help you get access to your account. After you make your account, I'll go through the registration process here in a second. But if you don't even know where to start after that, that's okay. We're here to help you. So there's a couple of different ways that you can reach out to us about registering, finding a race partner, whatever it might be. The first one is you can actually contact us on social media via Instagram or Facebook. We've got our Instagram pages and Facebook pages pretty regularly monitored, so definitely send us a message there. You could also send us an email at entryadmin@airraceclassic.org, like you see on the screen. Now, there is a private Facebook group as well. If you would like to be a part of that, we can get you added to that, and that's another great way to network as well. Now, if you are looking for a teammate, I do encourage you that in a message that you send via email or social media, just give me a brief little bit about yourself, how many hours you have, where you're located, and if you have an airplane or not, that's perfectly fine. Any little bit of information that we can gather from you, we can try to pair you as best as we can with the people either in your area or help connect you in other ways. I do also encourage you that on our how to register webpage, the link you see at the top there, that you start to read the rules. That's another big one. And again, Emmy, I don't want to read that much information. Trust me, you read through it pretty fast. If you have any questions about the rules, email us at entryadmin or info. One of us will get you an answer one way or another. So entry admin is your best place to get information and clarification on anything related to registering. Let's talk about the basic qualifications for the race. Now, there are two different levels of qualifications. There's the qualifications for you as the pilot and the qualifications for you and your airplane. So for you, you have to have a private or higher airman certificate with a rating for the class airplane to be flown, minimum of 100 hours PIC, a current medical or basic med documents, proof of required flight review or added rating, and then either the pilot or the co-pilot must have a minimum of 500 hours PIC or a current instrument rating at the point where you reach racer credential check-in at the start. So when you register, if you don't have 500 hours PIC or an instrument rating, that's okay. But make sure you have one of those by the time you get to the credentials check-in there at the start in June. More information about the qualifications for you as a pilot and for the airplane are located in our rules, which are on our website. Moving on to the qualifications for your plane, the competition class are open to single or twin engine airplanes that are certified in the normal or utility category with normally aspirated engines between 100 and 600 horsepower rated for continuous maximum operation, no limitations, at full takeoff power. Quite a mouthful, but that does very easily encompass types of airplanes that are allowed to participate in the Air Race Classic. And remember that Luscombe 115 horsepower is still placed in the top 10, so there's nothing wrong with a low horsepower airplane. Airplanes that don't meet the qualifications can also participate, but just in the non-competition class. Intercollegiate class follows very similar qualifications for the competition class as well. Now, this is the process of how to get yourself registered. So, like I said, you have to create your account. So, the best way to do that is you're going to go to our Aries Classic website. You're going to see in the upper right hand corner, there is a red log on button. You're going to click on that, and it's going to take you through the process of setting up your account. But, like I said, if you've raced or volunteered before, you've already got an account. Now, once you get into your account, you're going to see your account dashboard. On your account dashboard, you're going to see 2025 race registration. The link isn't going to work until racer registration opens January 2nd, 2025. So it might look just like this, where it's just white text for now and it won't click anywhere. But on January 2nd, it will work. Once registration is open, you'll click there and it'll bring you to your 2025 racer registration dashboard. On this dashboard, you're going to see a bright blue register button. And that's what you do to get started. You click that register button, you follow the prompts, and voila, you have registered as a racer. Like I said previously, to register as a racer, it's completely free. When you register your team, that's where the team registration fee will come in handy. But for you as an individual to register as a racer, even if you don't have an airplane or a teammate, is completely free. And I highly encourage you to do so, because we've had countless opportunities where people get a phone call, in April going, "Hey, we've got a team that needs a teammate. Are you willing to do it?" And you just never know when that call might come. Usually, I would say probably once or twice a year, we make that phone call. So definitely highly encourage everybody to register as a racer, even if they're a little bit interested. Now, before I close, I'm going to talk very briefly about our fall event, the ARC Air Derby. I host a separate webinar about this later in the year, usually in about the August time frame. But I did want to remind everybody that we are bringing it back for 2025. So the ARC Air Derby is a one-day create your own route challenge. It's an opportunity for pilots around the world to challenge their piloting skills, their flight planning, and navigation skills all in a one-day event. It's co-ed, so your teams just have to consist of one female pilot or one female student pilot. And you, again, have to have two pilots in the Derby team, just like you do in the Aries Classic team. It's just in the Derby team, they can be co-ed. And what I think is the best part about it is that you can fly almost any airplane. So experimentals are allowed in the ARC Air Derby, which is a little bit different from the Aries Classic. Why fly the Derby? Just a couple things to consider. It's done in one day, which is very different from the Aries Classic is. The Aries Classic is about 10 days of commitment. And so if you can't commit to that, that's okay. We've got an event for you called the ARC Air Derby. So it's a great alternative for those that if you don't want to commit to this full race, we have this one day event that you can do in your local area. That also saves a little bit of money, some PTO, and you can fly with more people as well. Any flight instructors, friends, family, all of that becomes a little bit more feasible with the ARC Air Derby. Now, here's a couple of resources to consider as you explore more about air racing and women's air racing. The first is a fantastic film. It's called Beyond the Powder. Beyond the Powder was filmed by Kara White with Hemlock Films as a part of the 2014 Air Race, which means that Kara was actually in the backseat of an actual race plane racing in 2014. I've had the pleasure to get to know Kara. She's a fabulous individual and her and her team have done an amazing job representing air racing history, women's air racing history, and how we've become the race that we are today. It's a beautiful film, and I highly encourage everybody to watch it. The second thing I always encourage is the book Sky Girls. This is by Janora Jessen, who just recently passed away, actually. She not only is a veteran racer, but she was also one of the Mercury 13 astronauts. And I've met her in person. It's just a beautiful book as well. She does a fantastic job writing about her experiences in air racing and how important this story is to not only us as women pilots, but also all of the aviation industry. And lastly, Breaking Through the Clouds. It's a documentary all about the first women's national air derby. This was produced in 2010, and it really highlights and focuses on the 1929 women's air derby. A fantastically done documentary as well. All of these are either produced or written by women, which of course I like to highlight. Also on our Air Race Classic website, we have the AUTAR database, which gives all of the race data dating back all the way through the AUTAR 1947, 1948 timeframe, all the way to the present, whether it's on the AUTAR or the Air Race Classic website. So again, just some fantastic resources to learn more about air racing. So thank you again, 99s, for hosting me and for having me back yet again. It's such a pleasure to be here to share all about my passion of air racing. And I really hope to see more women get involved this year, whether it's through the Air Race Classic full race or through the ARC Air Derby.